Last year, in 2023, we saw 10 different games being remade across multiple platforms and genres, and I think that all of them are actually worth trying out. So in this video, I'm going to give you a little retrospective and a few pointers to see how they hold up, whether you've played the original games or not. So let's dive right into the 10 video game remakes that were released in 2023. The first remake of the year was actually among the best ones. Dead Space, originally released in 2008 on PlayStation 3, is a survival horror that follows the story of Isaac Clarke aboard the spaceship USG Ishimura. The original game was already known for its extremely efficient and gory atmosphere, creepy monsters, and engaging story. It's revamped in Frostbite engine, and the remake adds lots of things. New lore, voice acting for Isaac, who was actually mute in the original game for some reason, and many important gameplay improvements. One game-changing feature is the Intensity Director, which customizes the player's experience on the fly with randomized environmental changes and jump scares, making every playthrough stressful, even for the players who know the original game inside out. You add to this an amazing artistic direction and sound design, and you've also got one of the best survival horror games in recent years. Like a Dragon, Ishin is a remake of the Yakuza series spin-off that many people were expecting, but also not really, bringing Japanese gangster samurai action to a global audience. The original game, released in 2014 on PS3, was a Japan-only exclusive, and we had to wait 10 years and quite a few online petitions to finally play it. With its upgraded engine, visuals, additional minigames, and new motion cap and voice acting, the idea with this remake was to bring this game up to the standards of the latest Yakuza entries. But the most impressive feat with this remake is, in the end, simply the localization work, for two reasons. Yakuza games are in general extremely rich with details, lore, item descriptions, and humor heavily imbued with Japan's unique culture. But in this specific case, developers also had to convey the complexity of the Edo period, the historical context in which the game takes place. Being able to translate that to a Western audience must have been a massive undertaking, and I think we're really lucky to finally be able to discover it. Kirby's Return to DreamLand was a cute little game originally out in 2011 and now returned on Nintendo Switch. The original game was already your typical kids and family-friendly platformer and became very much appreciated thanks to its 4 players co-op feature. The remake obviously keeps this, along with a very accessible difficulty, but also adding quite a few features. New copy abilities, many new sub-games, and a short but fun new extra mode where you can play as Magalore, the game's antagonist. The use of cel shading, new character models, altered animations, and remastered music and sounds all nicely modernized the original game without losing touch with its original design. This game might seem like a weird choice for Nintendo to remake, but it can be a good introduction to the series for newer audiences, and I personally found this game to be the best Nintendo platformer to play with my young kids and at the same time let them see a piece of video game history. As many of you know, the original Resident Evil 4 on GameCube was already groundbreaking and heavily influenced later Resident Evil entries, survival horror games in general, and arguably any third-person action game of the 21st century. The remake obviously couldn't be that innovative, but also set an example as the most polished remake of 2023. The progression of the game is pretty much identical to the original, but with quite a few additions in terms of narration and gameplay. Rewritten dialogues, a more open exploration area with different side quests, a parry system, improved AI, new enemies, and so on. This, on top of great graphics and an artistically stunning and immersive experience, is probably the reason why Resident Evil 4 Remake was even nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards 2023, which for a remake is kind of weird when you think about it, but also gives a good idea of how much work and effort went into it. If you want to learn more about the place of this remake among all the other Resident Evil remakes, check out my other video. The title of this video mentions that 10 games have been remade in 2023. In fact, I only list 9 remakes, but that's because 2 games were remade into 1. Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp remade and repackaged 2 original Game Boy Advance games that were quite important back in the early 2000s because they really helped make turn-based strategy games more familiar to Nintendo demographics. Their gameplay had a certain depth, maturity, and originality to them. This is kept very faithfully in the remake, but it also added new features like online multiplayer, a map maker, or alternative missions. You can also choose between the original difficulty, still pretty accessible, or a more casual option, and the new voice acting and animations are nothing fancy, but still welcome. It's true that a few technical aspects could have been more polished, but what matters the most in this genre is fortunately intact. The gameplay is simple yet solid like in the original, and should please both veterans and newcomers interested in trying out a franchise that probably deserves a bit more recognition. Okay, so just for everyone to realize, we weren't even midway through the year and already 6 good remakes were out, and it didn't stop. In May 30th, 2023, the kind of outsider but very much anticipated remake of System Shock came out. The original game from 1994 was a very unique and not so accessible first-person action adventure game in which we were controlling a security hacker trying to dismantle Shodan, an AI antagonist. Its complex gameplay and level design led the game to be very influential, explaining why a remake was actually kickstarted back in 2015. Despite a very long and chaotic development process, the remake we got is fortunately very good. The engine was remade from scratch, with enhanced character models and more detailed environments, which allowed the artistic direction of the original game to truly shine. The story remains mostly the same, with some new conversation options, and the gameplay and level design were also optimized without nerfing down the high difficulty of the original game. In the end, System Shock Remake is a very loyal must-play for fans of the original game, but also a fascinating look at a piece of video game history for new players. In 2023, just a year after its prequel was remade, Front Mission 2 Remake came out. The original franchise was a very reputed tactical RPG with robots, offering tons of customization options and pushing us into pretty mature war stories. The problem is that no one outside Japan could understand those stories. Of course, we've had since good fan translations, but it's good to finally have an official English translation and many other languages. It's true that the other changes are mostly aesthetic, updated visuals, a few minor tweaks to the UI, some optimization to loading times and so on, but beyond that everything else is pretty much the same. It has been criticized by some, but developers said they wanted to stick as much as possible to the original gameplay so that all of the existing guides and tutorials would not become obsolete. It's a conservative stance, but pretty legit to be fair, for a game relying so much on its demanding combats and rich mech customization possibilities. Star Ocean: The Second Story R is a remake of the highly acclaimed second installment in the Star Ocean series, and oh boy, that's a good remake. The original game's excellent and touching story remains pretty much identical, and some old school, a bit grindy but down the line really fun mechanisms, for example the skills and talent system, have also witnessed little to no changes. But it's a very good remake because what it changed, it did beautifully. The most impressive feature is the graphical overhaul, introducing an amazing use of HD 2D. We also have slightly rewritten dialogues, a few additional features in combats, and other little bonuses that pay respect to the earlier versions of the game. For example, we can switch between old and new voices, character arts, and music anytime during our playthrough. So in the end, the game delivers exactly what it promised, the early 2000s old-school JRPG vibe and depth, but in a beautifully revamped package that I hope will show the beauty of retro Japanese RPGs to a new audience. There were some rumors when the game was announced, but it felt too good to be true. Super Mario RPG, a classic from 1996 on the Super Nintendo, got a remake, and this was not a given, because the original marked essentially the end of any exclusive partnership between Square Enix, then Squaresoft, and Nintendo for 3 decades. The remake is a very faithful recreation of the original game in more modern standards. Full 3D graphics, updated character names, and the option to switch between the original music and a newly arranged soundtrack. The gameplay and progression was kept largely, if not completely, identical to the original, which sometimes felt a bit too minimalistic to me, but you'll also notice plenty of quality of life improvements, auto-saving, the ability to switch out party members mid-battle, and an extra storage bin. The result is a simple remake, but a great RPG that will speak to many, nostalgic gamers who actually discovered RPGs through Mario, European players who never got a chance to play the original, or younger players who simply now have a chance to discover this light-hearted, funny, and somehow still very unlikely partnership between Nintendo and Square Enix. And there you have it. I know that too many remakes can be perceived as a lazy move from developers, but looking at last year's remakes, they actually all hold up. And if we consider all the audiences playing video games today and how much time has passed, I don't think there can be too many remakes. A good remake will make an older game even better. A minimalistic remake will allow a new audience to discover it in modern standards. And even a bad remake will simply remind us that it's worth going back to the original retro games sometimes. In any case, I expect some of the upcoming remakes to be excellent. Silent Hill 2, Dragon Quest 3, I can't wait to discover them, and will definitely share my thoughts when they're out.